to Bo Diddley,
Mm-hmm.
I was blown away by how down to earth he was. Like you said, salt of the earth, but also that you can perform and lead and do those things and not have to be in control, and not have to have this paranoia that somehow I'm going to be shown up if I'm not the center of attention. Because he still was, but he had enough experience to realize that our playing our best wasn't going to detract from anything that he was getting out of it.
Right, yeah.
So that was my takeaway from that gig. I mean, along with a nice paycheck and the experience.
Hurt.
Well, it's funny. I have to fast forward it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say, and I'm saying this kind of in code, that's why when I'm in the pulpit, people wonder, well, gee, aren't you nervous? Because there's going to be like 100 people in church today. And I just think back, well, I played him for the 1600 at Symphony Hall. I mean, that was kind of scarier in a way than this. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. But I'm going to leave that fast forward until we get there.
Okay.
But so along the thread of what did I do after Zap, so I'm working at the phone company. I'm playing gigs. And I kind of reached a point where I said, I'm at a point now because of my phone company living as a manager, I can be really selective about what I want to do.
Right.
I used to go all over town playing like a dive in Somerville for like pizza money.
Right.
And I said, I don't have to do that anymore. So I started just only playing what I wanted to play. And some good friends of mine from Berkeley, every now and then when they would have a studio project, like that band Monsoon that I showed you earlier, and a few others, they would call and say, we're going to do an album. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Wow.
And so I've done a few of those here and there and a couple of other things. But I reached a point where I think I wanted to be all along and didn't realize it, which is when I play, I want to play for enjoyment, and I want to feel good about what I'm doing.
Sure, yeah.
And if I'm doing that, but I'm not famous or, some drum god,
a star,
that's still fine by me.
Yeah. Because
the main thing is when I sit down and play, I enjoy myself.
Right.
And when I work with others who want to have me on the date, they appreciate what I do. And what more can you really ask for?
Yeah, really. I mean, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not taking away from any of my friends who've gone on and done phenomenally well in the business, but I realized subconsciously at some point I made a decision that I wasn't into it enough to sacrifice everything that the business was going to demand from me. Okay.
I just want to let you know we have a caller joining us right now. Bill, is that you?
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest from last Friday night, Bill Lumen. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing good. I could be doing better. We had a little change in issues here in Georgia with the Obama thing, but I'm listening. I don't want to hijack the show.
No, not at all. No, I'm glad. I told you got an open invitation to join the program anytime you want. All right, and I meant that. So I'm glad to have you on board. Rodney's an old friend of mine, and I've been, especially in the last, I guess, 5 years, been more closely following what's been going on in his life because I've seen some amazing things happen. And that's really what we're talking about, Bill. So if you have any questions, I want you to feel free to just step right over top me. Just make sure you put the the phone close to your mouth so we can hear you better, and interrupt me. And if you have any problems cutting in, just what's that?
I got one observation.
What's that?
He mentioned something about he would become more mellow once he became a successful musician. He thought that would become part of his personality. Old age does that, man.
Well, I got the age thing down.
Okay, you should be mellow.
Here. Don't we all? We've all got that age thing down.
Well, hi, Bill. Yeah. Actually, what I was getting at is I thought, like I said, in my naivete, that if you were given enough of a gift from God to play the way some of these people did that I looked up to, that somehow I don't know if it would humble you or make you more at peace or whatever. And I was just surprised to learn that that wasn't true for everybody. And I realized it was very young thinking. So I've seen both sides of the coin. But I agree with you. Yeah, age does mellow you. You know, your vision changes, and you know, you just don't stress over certain things like you did when you were younger. I totally agree with that.
That's really it. Yeah. Well, Bill, like I said, feel free to hang out.
I'm not sure it's just age. Sorry about that. I won't talk over you. I'll just sit back and listen.
Yeah, I know. It might have been what we were doing back in the 70s too, but that's a whole other story. So anyway, so Rodney, so you were doing this, you were doing the whole Ma Bell thing. You're doing some gigging.
Yeah.
And some things were happening. It was around that time you met your wife?
Yeah. I met my wife. There is another interesting little tale in itself. A good friend of mine who's actually she's a godmother for one of my daughters. We used to work next to each other in the phone company where our cubes were kind of side by side. And she was on a rant one morning about this terrible date that she had been on the night before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this guy apparently just really annoyed her. I mean, she had a list even. And I said to her, I said, you know, Kelly, I got to see this list because I'm wondering if I do these things.
Right.
And somehow we got into the conversation about her roommate. So I'm like, yeah, well, you know, she's cute, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I did a very...
She's gorgeous, by the way.
Well, I think so, yes. I did a very gutsy thing. I had a promotional picture from a band I was working in.
Right. And
we were all duded up and made up and stuff, so I figured I'd look halfway decent.
Yeah.
So I gave her this picture, and I said, bring this to your roommate and tell her that this guy would be interested maybe just in going out. And so Kelly did. And Tanya agreed to go out. Now, the first date was a disaster. Because where she lived in Malden, which probably means nothing to anybody who's not from Boston, but it's slightly north of Boston.
Okay.
And the directions that I got were a little vague.
How little?
So, well...
A lot little?
Well, they weren't a lot little, but it was unclear. She lived like in a triple-decker, and it was unclear which floor she lived on.
So you're wandering around?
Well, I didn't have a phone number, and of course there was no help. There were no names in the mailbox.
No GPS?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nothing.
Okay.
So I sort of gave up and went home. Got home, my phone is like melting, you know, from the hate calls from Kelly, who was mad because we were all going to get together and just watch some TV.
And you blew it.
And I blew it. Kelly was livid. Tanya did not want to talk to me. She thought I was just another, you know, jerky guy.
Yeah.
Blew off the date. I was extremely apologetic. I said, no, it's not like that. I told her, look, it's really lame, but I didn't even know what apartment you lived in. Nobody told me anything. And I said, give me another shot.
So you were a victim.
Well, you know, I was
a victim of love.
I was lamely impaired.
Okay. Yeah.
But she gave me another shot, and I took her out to dinner the following week. And as they say, the rest is history.
Right.
We've been married. We'll be married. It's at the point now where I have to actually think.
You have to think.
Head.
It's been so many years.
Yeah, I think it'll be 22 years.
You know, if she's listening, you're in trouble. You know that.
Why is that?
He doesn't remember how many years.
She has the same problem.
Oh, okay. Well, then you're on the same ground.
Yeah.
All right.
When people ask us, how long have you been married? We look at each other like, you going to corroborate? Because I don't remember.
All right. Well, just don't forget that 14th is coming up. It's an important day. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, Valentine's Day is coming.
I already got her gift.
Okay.
Yes.
Good man.
Yeah.
All right. Don't want to see you in the doghouse.
No, that's not, you know, because I can't fit with Oliver and them.
Or Stanley.
Yeah, I'll be up in the room.
She's a scrub tech.
So I met her, and that was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and this is scrub tech.
That kind of actually got into the next phase in my life.
No, you want to talk to me?
Which is that we were living in Boston, in Malden at the time, and we had some friends from church who lived in southern New Hampshire. And we used to go way into the country, so we thought. It really wasn't, but to us it was. We would go up certain times of the year, And we went up one Columbus Day weekend for apple picking and foliage peeping and all the kind of stuff that you do up there. And it just so happened that Pam was a real estate agent. And she said, you kids might want to think about, getting your own home. And we were really paranoid about it.
Right.
And she said, well, let me just show you this house that came on the market. And we had no choice but to follow her because we didn't know the area, so we had to be led back to the highway.
Right.
So we were at her mercy.
Okay.
So she brings us to this house, and I'm looking at it. I'm going, this is everything I want.
Really?
It's got, fireplaces and this and that.
Little pink houses.
Well, not little pink houses. Oh, Lord, no.
No.
But it did have some nasty orange carpet,
That had to go.
Yeah, that went. That went immediately.
And
But
a place for the humidor.
Exactly. We need room for the gloatador.
The gloatador.
The gloatador.
Yeah. Gloating over all those cigars.
Yeah, not so much anymore, but...
yeah, but back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at any rate, we're looking around. I'm ready to make an offer. Tanya is not.
Oh?
And then we get back to Malden, and the triple-deckers are right on top of each other. I can hear the next-door neighbor yelling at her kids, and there's noise in the street and stuff. She said, let's get out of here.
Mm-hmm. So
we move up to New Hampshire, and where things took its next turn... my next-door neighbor, well, we're looking for a new church family now.
Right.
We've moved out of Boston.
Right.
We're about maybe 45 minutes to 50 minutes out of town.
You're kind of in the boondocks, right?
Well, it's not the boondocks, but it's over, the border, just slightly over the border from Massachusetts into southern New Hampshire.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a haul now to take an hour each way, to worship. I mean, that's about how far it would be each way.
Right. Sure.
And so we started looking for a new church home, and it just happened that my next-door neighbor, who I didn't even know that well, let me tell this. The first time I met my neighbor, it was funny. When we moved into New Hampshire, we moved in December.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been like Arctic tundra,
but
it was like that Buffalo day. It was in the mid to high 60s, and it was clear as a bell.
Huh.
So we move in. Following week, nor'easters
really
come out of nowhere.
You got hammered.
We got hammered. So at the time, I got this beautiful 88 Nova hatchback.
Right.
And like a dope, I think I'm just going to bust through this drift in my driveway.
Not going to happen.
It didn't happen. The car, it was like a mosquito
up their axles,
hitting like, super glue.
Yeah, right. That's it. Yeah.
Before I could get out of my car, it's like a movie. I see these two figures coming from out of the snow across the street.
Right.
And they start shoveling around my car like a bunch of wild people. They just shoveling. And it freed me in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And before I could even say thanks, they just kind of disappeared back into the snow like a movie. So I didn't get a chance to really meet them until the thaw in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But I still didn't know anything about them.
Mm-hmm.
So I go at a recommendation from some friends to this church about maybe 2 miles away.
Right.
And my next door neighbor, Ed, is a member there.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't know you went here.
Uh-huh.
And he said, well, what did you think? I said, well, I enjoyed my service. I'll probably come back.
Right.
And he said, well, can you hang on a minute before I leave? I need a hand with something. So I said, yeah, sure. I'm thinking, there's some boxes or you got to clean up something in the fellowship hall, whatever.
Yeah, or the toilet stuck.
Yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He brings me to the back, and I'm counting money with him the first time I visit this church. So that kind of locked me in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was his intent or not, but
the trust.
But I started going there, and should I go on about this?
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
So this church had 2 services, and maybe it's unusual, but the 11 o'clock service was actually the smaller service.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody came to the earlier one, I guess, so they could do stuff with their kids.
So they have the day.
Yeah. So they would always need volunteers to do something because there just wasn't enough people. Somebody would have to take up the offering or bring up the communion or whatever it was.
Right.
And so Ed and I would do that. And then it turned into, well, we need somebody to read the lessons because we don't always have a reader. And I said, well, I can do that.
Right.
Because, again, if you've played in front of a lot of people and stuff that I've done, getting up and talking to a front of people.
No different.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like, oh, my God, I have stage fright because I've kind of already been there, done that.
Right.
So I volunteered to do that.
Okay.
And then one day out of the blue, my pastor says, I want you to be my assistant.
Really?
And I just kind of saluted and said, sir, yes, sir. And then it was like, so what does that mean?
Yeah, right.
I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted me to be his worship assistant, helping with the readings and the prayers and all this kind of stuff. And little did I know that